Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What Israel Is. This episode is rather apropos the latest episode about the gay pride events in Israel. One thing that was always puzzling to me with regards to the far white right was their insistence that we, the Jews, are behind multiculturalism. The whole idea of opening the borders to immigration and this is kind of ignoring the fact that said immigrants are often more likely than the resident population to have anti-Jewish sentiments, which is really weird because why would Jews want to bring in anti-Semites if this is some kind of a plan? And what is the plan? I've heard it's like this supposed to be we bring in less educated people so that we can control them, and by controlling them, we control the society at large. I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, what's the plan? Jews are forced to flee because of anti-Semitism, and then they come to Israel. So how can they control the? I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I don't expect these people to be consistently sane or to make rational arguments. But we are also accused of being behind the other aspects of progressivism. So, for example, intersectionality, the whole creed of intersectionality. And essentially the idea that all struggles are the same and we should unite, and if you belong to one minority group, then you should help all other minority groups, and the minority groups are kind of arranged according to caste by how disenfranchised they are, etc. And this too seems to me demonstrably wrong, because again of how evident it is that this movement is antagonistic to Jews. We have an example of this from last week in Chicago. And Chicago hosted a Dyke March. The Chicago Dyke March, as I understand it, is a kind of a supplemental event to the larger Pride Parade. And this one is a march that was supposed to be more around the dogma of intersectionality. And within that march were a couple of people girls who marched with rainbow flags adorned with the Star of David. And they were essentially given an option of folding their flags and putting them away, or leaving the march, and they decided to stand for their pride and leave. Now, what happened in the wake of this is essentially the Dyke March. They claimed that their claim and the reason why they were asked to to begin with to put away their flags was that the flags were triggering and making some of the marchers feel unsafe, particularly because the flags were pinkwashing and Zionistic. Now, the flags were not Israeli flags. The flags simply showed the Star of David. And this is something that I've actually seen being said. One person posted in response to the Dyke March on Twitter that the symbol is not Zionist. It is a universal Jewish symbol. And this is actually something that the one of the marchers told them during the event itself. And I saw somebody respond to this by saying the following: good symbols or innocent symbols could be co-opted by bad people. And she added an image to her post, which was one of a Hindu swastika. Because of course it'll be a swastika. And this is really frustrating to me, how anti-Zionists can't help it. They really can't. And they so often accuse us of playing the Holocaust card, when, from my experience, it is almost always anti-Zionists who leap down the chimney hole first by either claiming that we are Nazis or like Nazis, or how we would make Hitler proud, or how we are proving him right, and the like. Fuck you, seriously. But, you know, after that, what happened is that the once it was shown that this particular narrative is insufficient and harmful to the Dyke March, they proceeded to smear the marchers, the Jewish marchers, as if they were all cut from the same cloth. This is something that I have seen no proof of. That they all belong to a Zionist organization, particularly one that deals with pinkwashing Israel, meaning excusing the occupation by showing how Israel is nice to gays. On that topic, there's the previous episode. Whatever. Less relevant right now. Let's say that this was a legitimate way to handle this, and just trying to smear your the people you have victimized by association. What if they're Zionists? The thing is that the march has described itself as anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian, and this is something that's interesting. They've actually asked one of the marchers during the march itself, "Are you a Zionist?" And she said the following: "Yes, I do care about Israel, but I also believe in a two-state solution and an independent Palestine." Hallelujah. Yes, this so much. But this isn't enough for them. Because To them, this is a black and white issue, or maybe a brown and white issue would be a bit more accurate. It is either to them that you are completely opposed to Israel, in in essence to Israel's existence, to its very existence, or you are an evil Zionist. By the way, this is only with regards to Jews. Because if you are a member of any other ethnicity, you would A, not be asked that question, and B, be allowed to have no position on that question. So yeah. And why isn't it enough? Really, one of the Dyke March collectives organizers has answered this really succinctly. And she said this: because I view it like the Apache in America. Indians and cowboys. People who were invaded by refugees fleeing religious oppression. Nice of her to acknowledge the religious persecution of Puritans in England and of Anabaptists in Europe, but A, she's equating that persecution to the persecution of Jews, and B, the more sinister claim here is that I am not indigenous to my land. Fuck you. Fuck you. The very tragedy of this conflict, and this is something I would really like it if more people recognized, is that this is a conflict between two indigenous people who, for whatever reason, cannot recognize the authenticity of their fellow indigenous people and feel that, like, well, not all Zionists feel like they need to actually have possession of the entire land, but like each group sees itself as the legitimate masters of this land. I am a Jew, and I know this is inconvenient for you, but I am not European. My father, who was born in Europe, in Hungary, is not European. And if you have any misgivings about it, you can ask the people at Jobbik whether he is European and whether they would like to have him back. So yeah, another thing that she said is that having Zionists in the Dyke March would be like having, what was it? Nazis in a synagogue. Again, can't you try and hold it back? Can't you try and not do that? Can't you try for one time in your lifetime not to be a complete asshole? So, according to the organizers themselves, the situation began with a heated anti-Israel discussion online, which made some of the more pro-Israel marchers, kind of, you know, anxious about the march itself. And then when they arrived with the pride flags with the Star of David on it, Palestinians, this is what the organizers said, actually pestered the Jewish marchers about their intentions and opinions. So it's legitimate that they're doing this because they're oppressed. So any minority can just start asking people of another ethnic group about their opinions with regards to whatever, and this is legitimate. Essentially what happened is that the Chicago Dyke March failed to protect these Jewish marchers. And the reason is because they don't recognize Jews as an ethnic group, as a minority, as anything really except for evil white man. What is the space we Jews occupy in the intersectional caste system? We are only ever a minority when we're oppressed and targeted by the right people, quote unquote, right people. Only when white nationalists can be blamed for our victimhood is our status as victims recognized by these people. And this harkens kind of back to the end of the civil rights movement, with a schism between Jews and the blacks on both the topic of the rising black nationalism, for example, the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam, and also the topic of affirmative action, which Jews were against, and lastly, the topic of Israel. This was really a heated topic in the civil rights movement, and it remains in the intersectional movement, because as we see, it really neatly fits into their narrative of white colonialists versus indigenous non-whites. And if you've been following me for a time, you may know that this is not a correct framing of this narrative. Both because, as I said just a couple of minutes before, we are an indigenous people to this land. And if you can show empathy to people who were dispossessed 500 years ago, when Europeans began colonizing North America, then I see no reason why you shouldn't show the same empathy towards people who were dispossessed longer than that, say 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. If there is no time limit on empathy, then you should be consistent about that. But also because even if for whatever reason we would say that Ashkenazis are white, and I reject that, Israel is not an Ashkenazi country. A plurality of Jews here are not Ashkenazi, but rather of Sephardic and Mizrahi background. So yeah, this doesn't really work. there's the reason why the narrative doesn't fit is it requires an entire YouTube channel to explain. And this is where I come in. And I can't do it just here in a matter of seconds. Essentially, but to them we are white. Because of our appearance and our financial conditions. That we are ethnically distinct from Europeans. And that we are targeted more than any other group in the US on the basis of religion. This is irrelevant to them. And more unsettling to them is the fact that any given Jew might, and probably does, have a deep emotional tie to the only Jewish nation state in the world, in the land of his ancestors. This is making these people extremely uncomfortable with us because of their tone-deaf framing of this story. To finish, I want to read something that another queer activist wrote. This is my pride flag. She is displaying a flag shaped like the flag of Palestine, essentially, with the rainbow colors and a pink triangle with the crescent and a star. It has the Islamic crescent and star on it, like the flags of Turkey, Pakistan, etc. Should I and my flag be banned from Pride because of the countless horrific murders of LGBT people in Muslim countries, the state-sanctioned hatred and persecution of LGBT people? Because if you ban Jews and Jewish flags because you hate Israel, logically you have to ban me too. Or you could just admit you're anti-Semites. What will it be, Dyke March, Chicago? I appreciate the sentiment, but don't you know, there is no such thing as anti-Semitism because you can't be bigoted against white people. And you and all other Muslims are allowed to be as bigoted as you like because you're an accepted minority. I am pondering about this Jewish question that the intersectional movement has, and I think maybe I have a final solution. Maybe if we could just show outwardly whether or not we are Zionists, and by doing this, help all other non-Zionist or anti-Zionist Jews to regain their status as an accepted minority. Maybe it could be, I don't know, a badge. Dyke March Collective. Fuck you. See you guys next week, hopefully.